Hello, my name is Sam Strong. I'm Tribal Secretary of the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians, and we're proud to have you here today. And we wanted to present some of the work that we're doing out at the treaty camp. Recently, they restarted construction on the river crossing for the Red Lake River there, and we believe that doing this without a cultural monitor that represents Red Lake is in fact in violation of trust responsibilities that the federal government holds with us, as well as relationships that we have with state and county governments. And this is in direct violation of all the permits that they've issued, and we want to have someone there that can represent our interests, that can fairly look at potential environmental and cultural sites that are of importance to the Red Lake Band. And so that's what this press release was all about, is making sure that people understand that Sasha Bolia will be our tribal monitor, and her role will be to ensure that all of the protections that should be in place for our land within the 1863 treaty boundaries are respected, and that our living cultural historical properties, as well as the environmental sites, are protected. And throughout this process, we have someone there that we trust, that has been trained under our archaeologists to ensure that this project limits the damage and exposure to these very important sites.
So you want to, okay. Well, you know, I mentioned earlier that there's 3 separate appeals that are pending right now, and 2 of them are state appeals and 1 is a federal appeal, and the federal one pertains to the Army Corps' permitting of certain of the water crossings under the Clean Water Act. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can influence the Army Corps. I believe that we all believe that the Army Corps' decisions are vulnerable. And so in order for us to, in addition to have the appeal of their administrative decision now pending, we're going to try to influence the Corps' tribal people, tribal liaison people, and we want to impress on them that one of the primary flaws in the environmental review for the Army Corps, the agency that does have a trust responsibility to the tribe, because the state agencies don't, state courts don't, state Public Utilities Commission, there's no trust responsibility with the tribe. But the feds do, and the Army Corps specifically has a responsibility to look out for tribal cultural resources. In the process of doing that, the feds, the Army Corps in this case, had a responsibility under NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, and the Clean Water Act to do their own environmental impact statement. They didn't. They piggybacked on this flawed state environmental impact statement that was literally sent back for fixing twice by the Minnesota Court of Appeals. So even though it was ultimately decided by the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission and the State Court of Appeals that the EIS environmental impact statement was adequate, that barely adequate EIS is what the Army Corps is relying on to do their work. They're not doing what the federal law requires. We think they're vulnerable there.
And we also believe that they're in violation of the National Historic Preservation Act. And one of the things that I think we need to be very clear about is that currently, you know, through all this environmental review process, there haven't been any Red Lake archaeologists or anyone that represents the tribe. Throughout that whole process, we've been ignored. And we've tried to get to the table, and they've ignored these requests. And so I'll use an analogy. You know, would you go to Canada and say, hey, the United States approved this pipeline, so it's okay to go through? Essentially, that's what they've done here. They've gone to a different tribe, the Fond du Lac Band, and they've used their environmental people to authorize a pipeline through Red Lake territory. And that's a direct violation of our treaties. You know, we need to be represented. Our interests, our cultural sites, our living sites, our historic sites need to be protected, and they haven't been protected, nor have they even been considered through these environmental reviews that are on the table. And so we need our rights to be affirmed. We need our rights to be respected. And we believe it's the role of the federal government to uphold this trust responsibility, step in and ensure that these rights are being protected for our people. And so that's what we're here to try to get. And hopefully we get cooperation from all the agencies that are involved in this pipeline.
We're confident that the state messed up the process. And we also are confident that the Army Corps is going to recognize they have a higher duty than the state actors. And one of the points that we're going to make on Monday, with the Army Corps, is that the process is broken. This whole process has demonstrated to us that this is not a correct process. And one of the things I mean by that is, at the state level, there's literally 17 different permitting authorities that all operate on separate tracks. They're not done by one body, one unified body. They're all piecemeal. So if you raise an issue that touches on one of these other ones that are outside of, let's just say, the Public Utilities Commission, they say, that's not our duty. We have just this narrow lane right here. And I said, well, wait a minute. By ignoring this and not looking at it as the whole, you're really disadvantaging us.
So I think, that's the main purpose of this whole press release, is to ensure that everyone understands our position and that we believe that it's time for, the federal government, the U.S. Army Corps, to step in and protect those trust responsibilities that were given to us by treaties. Treaties are the ultimate law of the land. They're upheld by the Constitution of the United States. And we believe it's the role of the federal government to uphold these treaties, the 1863 treaty. We ceded control of the Red River Valley, the breadbasket of America, some of the most fertile land in the entire United States. And as a part of that treaty, we upheld these rights, and we believe they're being violated. And we believe it's time that the federal government steps in to assert that these are our rights and that we need to be heard. We need to be at the table, and our cultural living and historical sites need to be protected immediately.
Another point I wanted to make is at the beginning, when I say at the beginning, I'm looking back to about 2013 and 2014. This same pipeline company, Enbridge, wanted to open up this corridor that they succeeded for this Line 3 pipeline. But at that time, they wanted to go ahead and run Bakken crude from western North Dakota, straight across North Dakota, through this new corridor they wanted to open up. And at that time, we were at the table again, and the Public Utilities Commission was not used to anything, tribal related. And so what the Public Utilities Commission decided at that time in that 2013 case with the Sandpiper, the Bakken crude pipeline, is no environmental impact statement study was necessary. This is a very large energy project. It's a no-brainer as far as we were concerned. And so we appealed it, to the Intermediate Court of Appeals, and they said that it was a no-brainer. Of course you need, an EIS for that large energy facility. And literally the next day, Enbridge withdrew their permits for that Sandpiper pipeline back in 2013 and bought 30% into the DAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline. They own 35% of the Dakota Access Pipeline. So they didn't want to deal with it. So speed the clock up a little bit to the beginning of Line 3, where the company wanted to open up that same corridor. They relentlessly wanted that same corridor. And we again figured out that they don't only want it for Line 3, they want to relocate the main line, all the pipeline, all 6 of them, down to this new corridor. That's what's going on. That's the other high stakes that we're dealing with right now. So when the company, Enbridge, applied for their certificate of need and route permit through that same corridor, they knew that they wouldn't get away with no EIS this time. And so they did it. They did an EIS. And it was it was deficient. It took them a long time. It's all just a bunch of filler. There's very little meaningful stuff in it. And so we appealed the first EIS, and one of the things that they totally overlooked was the impact of a spill into the Lake Superior water basin. Lake Superior is like the largest of the Great Lakes. This pipeline goes like feet from the shores of Lake Superior. And so the Court of Appeals said, you have to study an impact into the Lake Superior water basin in the event of a spill. Well, it's not only Lake Superior that be impacted, all the Great Lakes, all the fresh water in the world, but this is what the company did. They did spill modeling, not anywhere, where realistically would occur, but they did it 35 miles west of Lake Superior, where there was practically no chance that any of it would ever get into the Lake Superior water basin. And they got away with it. The Court of Appeals said that's an adequate spill modeling and answered the question, the concern that we had. So there's things like that go on in the permitting process. There's huge fudge factors, so to speak.
And currently an issue that's come to light very recently, not only from Red Lake, but from White Earth as well, is they've expanded their dewatering permits without consulting the tribes. And the process of doing that is going to kill our wild rice, and it's going to infect our entire ecosystem. And so all these plants and wild rice and other animals that we rely upon, that we live upon as a people, through sustainable harvest, they're going to be impacted. Wow. And they didn't even consult us. And so that's where that trust responsibility needs to be put on the table. We can no longer be ignored when they're making decisions without even consulting the tribes that have these rights to the land. They're totally ignoring that, and we believe that's why we believe that the federal government needs to step in and say, hey, you guys, this is the supreme law of the land. When we come into office, we're asked to uphold the Constitution, and these treaties are written into the Constitution, to be upheld. And so, it's really one of those situations where, we believe that it's of the vital importance that we take the appropriate time to protect these natural resources and to ensure that through this process that our wild rice, our monomen, our plants, our animals are given the best chance to live, to continue to thrive. And we believe what they're doing, and you see it. If you go out there, you'll see wild rice beds that are drying up. You'll see ecosystems that are being impacted, and there was no consultation, and that's going to impact our rights to this land forever.
What Sam's talking about there, Lower Rice Lake at White Earth is the largest wild rice bed in the world, the largest continuously producing wild rice bed. And this mainline pipe, these Enbridge pipelines go in very close proximity to it. And in order to do that, there was dewatering that was done. And it just went right under the radar. We just heard about it like within yesterday or the day before. We got pictures of Lower Rice Lake, which show how low the water is. Monomen, wild rice, is very sensitive. Needs to have the right water level, the right temperature, the right things in the water. By doing that, by looking at those pictures that we just got yesterday or the day before, it's definitely in jeopardy.
Yeah.
So this is something we've been saying consistently for years. And I think we're fine. And this is what I'll say, and Sam's heard me say this before. We did open up the state's ears a little bit, where they finally recognize it. But the problem is they don't understand the correct amount of weight they have to place on the tribal interests. They think that it's enough to acknowledge them and to brush them aside, but it's the weight that needs to be accorded them that they fail on.
Yeah. And I think in moving forward, we want to be at the table. We want to have our tribal monitors present when they're digging through our treaty territory. And I think when you look at everyone's permits, state permits, the Army Corps permits, All of these permits were predicated upon having tribal monitors present. And yet, not a single Red Lake tribal member or anyone that's affiliated with the tribe is there monitoring this. We have no tribal monitors.
There were no monitors.
And so why
That's
are
how
they
this came up.
why are they continuing to allow for these permits to be in place when this company is violating one of the key points that allowed these permits to continue?
Yeah.
You know, and they're degrading our environmental sites, our cultural sites, and I think it's important that we're at the table and that these constitutionally provided rights are continued to be upheld.
And the reason why the Tribal Council made this recent decision is specifically because the promised tribal monitors who supposedly had the training were not present, and the preparatory work for going underneath of the Red Lake River, there was nobody to check and see if anything. And so the council got together and they said, hey, you know, we know we got tribal members that have been out there for like 8 months. They're very familiar with the area. You know, those will be the ones under the guise of, we have a tribal archaeologist, very well versed, and he's the one that's going to guide these people. Treaty interpretation. The federal government, through the 8th Circuit, 1979, decided that the Red Lake Band did not have gathering rights, usufructuary rights in that larger ceded area. And so the tide is turning. Since then, we've had some very good decisions, you know, in our favor. And that these decisions are based on the canons of treaty construction that were most recently enunciated by the U.S. Supreme Court in the Mille Lacs case, the Mille Lacs decision. It was 20 years ago. And most importantly is treaties need to be interpreted the way the Indians understood it. Any ambiguities go in the favor of the tribe. Anything that's not specifically given up is reserved. With those canons in mind, we've succeeded in a couple of cases recently in getting the people to understand that applying those canons, that these usufructuary rights still exist. And further evidence of it is this Old Crossing Treaty that Sam talked about in 1863. It was not an arm's length deal. This was in the middle of the Civil War. You got the Gatling guns lined up behind the chiefs. And so they were under duress to do this. But over the treaty making process, there's 2-3 week process in there. There were interpreters and the chiefs, and then there was the U.S. people. The head person for the U.S. was a guy named Alexander Ramsey. He was a territorial governor of Minnesota. He came from the East. And Ramsey afterwards bragged to all of the people about, this is the largest land ripoff of Indian lands ever. But during that 2 week period, there was meticulous notes taken, you know, of the chiefs of what they said. And in that treaty journal, there's 6 separate references in there that Ramsey says to the chiefs that after this 11 million acre land cession, you'll continue to be able to use the land for these purposes. And so those pieces of evidence are very compelling when you apply these Indian treaty canons of construction that the U.S. Supreme Court has enunciated for us. And so we're gonna use those with the Army Corps to be able to get them to understand the correct way to look at this.
That's good.
What do you think?
Well, one question I would have with that is, there doesn't seem to be any enforcement for negligence in not following protocol.
Yeah.
How has the tribe conceived of, developed, or articulated any kind of enforcement mechanism that would be applicable to treaty violations?
Well, this is a perfect example. This was a gap a gap that was created because the tribal monitors who were supposedly trained weren't trained and weren't present. So the tribe said, hey, we're going to grab the bull by the horns, we're going to take control of the situation, and we're going to have the people there, and we're going to make sure they're looking out for our interests and not the interests of Enbridge through these tribal monitors. Now, have you heard the story on that? How these tribal monitors got trained?
I think it's an important story.
Yeah, it is. Okay. This happened about 3-4 years ago at the beginning of it. And this was a condition of the, early on in the Public Utilities Commission process. And the tribal monitors were considered to be essential. Well, one of the tribes east of us jumped up and said, hey, we'll lead this. This training, we'll do the sponsor, we'll be the site for all of the training, for classroom and out in the field. Our Red Lake archaeologist, Cade, went to the first meeting. He smelled a rat, and he never went back. He didn't need to go back. He knows more than they know. And so after they went ahead, that tribe that jumped to the top to say, we want to be the ones that train these monitors, they made that deal with Enbridge. Enbridge funded all of this training. And so after everybody's trained, they get their certifications. Then shortly after that, after they go start, doing their walking the route and looking at all their survey, and during the course of the beginning of the Public Utilities Commission contested case proceedings, that tribe cut a deal with Enbridge, and it resulted in them withdrawing their objections, to these permits being granted for this Line 3 pipeline. Everybody smelled a rat, and so that's one of another major factor why the tribal council here decided that, hey, this is enough. We're going to make sure we do it ourselves.
Did you say that Enbridge set up the training?
Enbridge and this tribe. Enbridge
Correct.
paid for the whole training and had a deal with this tribe that one tribe would be the one that was selected to lead the training.
It wasn't initiated through a tribal, the affiliation of the tribe.
It was initiated
themselves?
through
Yeah, it probably
Fond du
was.
Lac,
Yeah,
but
it probably was.
ultimately, you have people that are being trained by the company that's putting in the pipeline that aren't Red Lakers, that don't have our interests in mind, that don't know our history, our culture, our living cultural sites. So you have all these people that are purporting to represent us that are trained by the people that are in fact causing the degradation, and also have no affiliation with this tribe. And so you have hundreds of miles of line that has been unchecked by the appropriate authorities. And so that's what we're here today, is to say, hey, this is our right, and these are our laws, and these are our people that are upholding these, and we believe that everyone else should be respectful of these laws. And if they aren't, then it's the role of the federal government to step in and to ensure that this process is followed, and that all of the requirements for the land is met, that these people are out there to monitor it, that we've taken the time to ensure that historic and living cultural sites are protected.
Yeah.
What can people do to facilitate and support the work that you folks are doing that are off-site in other parts of the U.S.?
I don't know if you'd be how. I mean, heck, we don't know everything. We're all ears if somebody has something to help jumpstart us.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really, it's we're practicing our sovereignty.
Yeah.
And so really it's the role of the tribe to step in and to have our, tribally certified archaeologists and our people protect our interests. And so that's what we're here to do. We're here to practice our sovereignty that was created through these treaties with the federal government. These treaties that are upheld by our own United States Constitution. And so we believe that, that Constitution holds some weight, right? It should. And so those people within the state that are ignoring the Constitution, they need to understand what they are doing. And we need the federal government to step in and say, hey, these states are, going against federal laws. They're going against, these rights that were signed by our government. And we believe that will happen. And that's what we're here to do, is to ensure that everyone knows that this is our position, and that we're going to be continuing to practice our sovereignty, and we're going to continue to protect the rights of our people.
That there's another little missing piece that we haven't referenced yet, but it's also pretty relevant. This same company had trespassed across a piece of the tribe's land for 60 years. Yeah. A piece of the restored ceded land with 4 of the pipelines. And the tribe did settle the trespass case, with these guys. But the funds that were paid are held in escrow pending a land exchange. A piece of land that Enbridge bought. It's actually a good piece of land for the tribe. It's at the south boundary. And then they would get the piece it's a smaller piece that they polluted, They can have that one.
It's highly polluted too.
Yes.
We've done many studies at the site, and one of the things that a lot of people don't know is if there's a spill under a certain amount of volume,
it doesn't get picked up.
It gets it doesn't even have to be reported. And so all along the line, they have these pinhole leaks, right, that occur from this sand and this abrasion going on within the pipelines. They create these pinhole leaks, and so it's slowly leaking oil into the land. And that's what we found.
Yeah.
When we looked at the parcel and we did our studies, we found that. Yeah. And it's really, pipelines aren't safe. They are going to leak, especially when it comes to tar sands oil. And that's been proven. The biggest inland oil spill, Grand Rapids, Minnesota, not far from this same oil and these same pipelines.
It's the same main line. It's the same main line pipeline.
The reality is it's going to happen again. And the sad reality is that the state, all of these entities that have allowed these permits to go forth, they've allowed for, potentially a spill to happen that would hurt so many people in northern Minnesota, hurt so many native people, but not just natives. It would hurt our entire state, and there's so little benefit from having this pipeline, but the potential for it to spill has such a large impact on so many people. And so it really begs the question, are they doing this for the best interest of us, or are they doing this for the best interest of a Canadian corporation? And why are they doing that? We should be asking that question. And I think if you follow the money, you'll get your answers.
Yeah. We get all the risk, and they get all the benefit.
And a lot of this oil isn't even used by Americans. It's shipped down to the Gulf and to international ports.
Super tankers.
Yeah. We fulfilled our need here. Our Minnesota's need has been met many hundreds of thousands of gallons before this pipeline was even introduced. In fact, the need for Minnesota was met at 1/5 of the capacity of their existing lines. And yet they're saying it's for us, but it's not for us. It's for a corporation and for, the profits of this corporation. And it's a sad reality. It's going to hurt all of us. It's going to hurt Minnesotans. It's going to hurt everyone that is downstream from a potential leak.
Yeah.
And it's really it's concerning to see that this interest of a few is put ahead of the interest of all of us and our economy. The northern Minnesota economy is based on tourism, and who's going to want to come to our lakes, our rivers, our streams when it's filled with oil and you can't eat the fish anymore, you can't eat the rice. Yeah. That's not, it's going to kill the lifeblood of northern Minnesota economy. Our hospitality industry is going to be impacted. Our entire economy is based on, hospitality and tourism, and this pipeline is going to ruin all of that. One of the biggest attractors of people is the headwaters of the Mississippi. Why would you put
very close
a pipeline through the headwaters of the Mississippi? Even my friends that are pro-oil or pro-pipelines because they're safe, they even say, why would you put this through the headwaters? It makes no sense.
I know.
It's totally ludicrous to take one of the most attractive pieces of our Minnesota and contaminate it? Why would anyone that represents our state take one of the national treasures of this world, the headwaters of the Mississippi, the most pristine area of our country, and destroy it? For what? What are we gaining as a benefit? I think there's some governments that have benefited. I think there's some, a few that have benefited, but do all of us benefit? No. And all of us will suffer as a result of these decisions.
That there's a pattern with this company. That you just take a look at this line 3, what we've just described. The other one I just mentioned, that the DAPL, they have 35% of DAPL. Look at all the trouble that's caused. Look over further east, the Enbridge Line 5, over at the Straits of Mackinac. The governor of Michigan orders it shut down, and they're defying it. They just say that they're essentially flipping the bird at Michigan. Michigan has a pretty darn good reason, to be suspicious, of Enbridge, because the other big spill in 2010, Kalamazoo, that was in Michigan. They have a track record with them, and I don't know whether you've ever been to the Straits of Mackinac before, but that's at the boundary of 2 Great Lakes, and the waters are like a giant washing machine. And the Line 5 is literally in the Straits of Mackinac. It's not underwater. It's underwater. It's not underground underwater. It's right in the water.
Wasn't it hit?
It was hit. Anchors go through the Great Lakes, and so if that Line 5 breaks in that big washing machine, it's going throughout all the Great Lakes. That's this company.
Yeah, responsible for the 2 largest inland oil spills in the entire world.
Yeah,
and
Kalamazoo, Michigan, and then Grand Rapids, Minnesota, not far from here.
This is the company that's running the environmental review process and doing the training.
Yeah.
The next question.
And against all of those factors, the reason why the Red Lake Tribal Council stepped up is because even those tainted, conflicted people, tribal monitors, weren't present.
Yeah. Even when we were out there was no. We requested to see the tribal monitors, to communicate with them, and to date we have received no response. And even that in itself, even at face value, they're not even, and that's what they do. They violate the laws and they pay the fines and they move on. And as someone that lives within this state that is responsible to uphold, the rights of our citizens, for this tribe, it's extremely disheartening to see that, the rights of our people and the rights of all of northern Minnesota are being neglected. The right to, have a fair process that protects all of our environment. That's what all these environmental reviews are for. And even those, are tainted, and even those are not being followed.
Yeah, for sure. And what we hope to come out of all of this is a real substantive process that actually does the right stuff, because this broken thing that we've described definitely doesn't get to the truth.
Well, that sort of reflects back on free, prior, informed consent.
Yeah.
So what is the teeth that actually is going to make that a legitimate mechanism for tribes to have oversight?
Our focus right now is going to be on the agency that has the trust responsibility, and that's the Army Corps.
Yeah. And ultimately, we believe it's the role of the president to step in and uphold these treaty obligations. And President Biden, he says he supports tribal nations. He says he supports, the rights of tribal nations. And yet, they're not stepping in to protect those. And we expect them to step up, to follow through on their word, that they will protect the rights of tribal people. And they will uphold these trust responsibilities that have been neglected for centuries and centuries. It's time for a change. And I believe it's their role to step up and bring this change. That's what we elected him to do, and I expect him to follow through with his word.